Hello, thank you for joining me again. We are continuing the reading of The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by Jon Peniel. This is chapter 13, part 1, and we are on teachers and students. So let's get started. Please subscribe. Thank you for subscribing, and please push that like button. Okay, teachers and students, backing up a bit. While this chapter comes late in the book, the part of it that is my personal story really begins very early on, both before I went to the monastery and in my first days and weeks there. I was at the very least naive about many things, and you may also find a great deal of sarcasm and egoism in some of my early questions and comments to both teachers and elders, as I had not yet realized the wonderful virtue of humility. The ancient texts are clear and consistent. Find thyself a teacher. This is an old and time-proven growth method in many good spiritual traditions around the world. It is even still to be found in the Talmud, with somewhat different meaning and application these days. So, what is a teacher? It can mean many things. Let me start by saying there is a big difference between what we call a true teacher and other things or people that seem to be teachers. What I mean is that there are a lot of teacher, gurus, or preacher types that want followers. They want prestige, praise, worship, money, or a mix. Some want you to praise or worship someone or something else while they ride the coattails as being a representative of what you're supposed to be worshiping or praising. Some want it directly themselves, but a true teacher doesn't want any of those things. He teaches with his life primarily and kindles you through his unselfish love. He will accept good students to teach them how to change. He will teach philosophies or techniques to help you change. And it is a facilitator of change that a student can use like a tool. But he wants no blind or mindless followers, no worship, no praise. Anyone who does is not what we will refer to here as a true teacher. In our particular tradition, the Children of the Law of One, a true teacher must be enlightened, having experienced the death of the selfish separate self, and lives in total harmony, oneness with the universal spirit, and is a servant of universal spirit and vehicle for its universal will. Elders can also be teachers, but it isn't quite the same as the true teacher. The words used to describe such a being and the practices of other traditions obviously vary, but the end result should be the same, which we will detail in a moment. First, a word about worship. Worship is a very noble appearing way the selfish self uses to avoid personal responsibility, change, surrender, and its own separate self-demise. People take all the best qualities and ideas and personalize them into someone to worship rather than becoming that themselves. They idolize rather than idealize. There is a big difference. There's more info about ideals and using ideas in another chapter. Idealizing just sets a standard of change for you to shoot for. The self prefers idolizing and worshiping because that way it avoids the hard work and self-sacrifice required by surrendering to God and serving God. Speaking of which, many people don't like the idea of having a spiritual teacher or guru type person in their life. I know I didn't. Often this is for a good reason. There are many charlatans out there, but there are some saints too. And the real reason most people don't want a teacher is because their selfish, separate self knows it is the beginning of the end of its control and life. And as far as charlatans, what you get or get exposed to personally mainly depends on you and what your motives are. If you just want to mess around or seem spiritual or think you are spiritual, then you'll end up worshiping a charlatan. But if you really want to help to become truly spiritual, kind, caring, harmless, giving, then you'll find the real thing and use their example as an idea. Many people are taking courses, going to seminars, classes, and channels that are conducted by charlatans, and they're perfectly fine with it. It's the real thing most people are afraid of. Essentially, you get what's coming to you. You get what you deserve, or, to put it more accurately, you get what you are really after inside, whether you know it or not. I was looking for a teacher when I went to the monastery. I was just looking for a place where everyone was kind, sharing, and loving. That sounds good, doesn't it? But I hadn't really thought about the fact that I needed to be that way myself if I was going to be part of such a community. Nor did I really think about what I would need to do to become that way. In fact, I was so self-centered and egoed out myself, I figured I was already spiritual and virtually perfect. Wrong again. As I have said, all selfish selves would just love to be the only selfish person in a community full of unselfish people who just give to them all the time and don't give them a hard time about their selfish qualities. Keep dreaming. On about my third day at the monastery, during one of my first courses with elder student Raja, he spoke of an issue, but I didn't get it at the time. Some people think they can get everything they need themselves from books, seminars, and life. That may be true. It may not be true. Or it just might be a matter of speed or beating the odds. Everyone needs a true teacher at some point in their spiritual life to help them see beyond themselves and get beyond themselves, because the selfish, separate self is you until you're enlightened. So it knows your every move before you take it, and it will outwit you at every attempt to transcend it. If all you have is your separate self to rely on for your spiritual growth. Everyone also has all kinds of excuses why they don't want a teacher or need one. And of course, they can use legitimate and reasonable excuses because there are many false teachers, which provides the right rationalization to their self's feelings of avoidance. But the real reason most people don't like the ideal of having a teacher has nothing to do with whether the alleged teacher is a legitimate enlightened being or a charlatan. In fact, most people prefer charlatans because they are no real threat to the selfish, separate self. Whatever category you fall into, at least open your mind temporarily and read this chapter before you close your mind back up again, putting your mind back on the shelf along with this book. Maybe it will help you understand what true teachers are all about and how they can be a tool to help you attain your own goals. How can you defeat your enemy when it is you? Raja went on. Once a person has realized that their personal enemy and the great enemy of humankind is the separate self and the selfishness that it spawns, what then? They can choose to walk the path of unselfish love. Then what? They can study books, meditate, use various techniques for growth, or whatever, but there is a primary problem that supersedes any of these things. The selfish, separate self does not want to relinquish control to the inner/universal spirit. Inner self/universal spirit. More than that, the very nature of achieving universal consciousness means that the selfish, separate self will cease to exist as an independent entity. It will die, so to speak. So it will fight like a cornered animal for its survival. It will intellectually maneuver like a world-class chess champion to win the battle. It will use more clever trickery and deceit than the world's best con man. Before you can really get anywhere spiritually, you must first fully realize that the separate self has control over the brain, the desires, the emotions, etc. It has control over a person's entire life. So if you do anything that so much as threatens your separate self, it will use the things it controls against you. It knows when you are attempting to dethrone it, and it is fantastically clever in its way to keep control and maintain the illusion of separateness. It will fight your attempts to control of your life, or to put control of your life in the hands of the universal spirit. It won't fight fair either, and it's already an easy task for it because it simply needs to trick you a little. So again, everyone needs a true teacher at some point in their path. A true teacher that won't let the separate self get away with anything. I understand all that, Raja, but why do you say we need a teacher? Why can't we just get everything we need to change from books and life and meditation? How can you say you understand all that? You obviously haven't even heard a word I have said. It has fallen on deaf ears. Listen to me with your inner voice, not your separate self brain. It first filters everything you perceive, including my words. And the filter is your ego, your selfish separate self. The separate self is so clever, it can even use your own desire to change to keep you trapped. If it knows you are interested in growing spiritually, what do you think it will do? What would you do? What do you do? It can and will accommodate you. Sure, it will allow you to read books, etc. In fact, it will have you read books, go to the latest mediums channels, and hop from one growth method to another, one fad to another. Let you get immersed in religion, whatever, as long as what you do or get involved with doesn't really threaten the selfish separate self's control or existence. Even if you're working real hard at it and really doing everything you can to achieve enlightenment, you can perpetually be doing everything you seemingly can to enlighten yourself and be getting absolutely nowhere other than getting ahead, full of great spiritual rationalizations for the separate self to use in defending itself. You can spin your wheels forever, but in reality, you aren't doing everything you can unless you utilize the services of a true teacher, a clear mirror for which you can see the reflection of your own selfishness. Why do you need to see your selfishness? Doesn't it just go away as you learn more and achieve higher consciousness? There are a lot of people out there who are still totally selfish. even though they have a great deal of knowledge and experience in spiritual, metaphysical matters. These people know many meditation techniques and personal growth methods, and perhaps use them. They think because of all that, they are of higher consciousness. Naturally, the selfish, separate self lets them go for it, and it even pats them on the back for doing so well and being so spiritual. I guess it depends on how you define higher consciousness. But to me, the ancient teachings, such knowledge and experience doesn't mean you have higher consciousness any more than knowing how to build a house means that you actually have built a house or even have a house. He was right, of course, and the only reason I was avoiding seeing it was because of my separate self's fear and control over me, which I allow with my free will, even though it was subconscious at the time. So, how do you know when you are kidding yourself? There are several ways. Here's a simple premise to think about. How can someone be of higher consciousness if they lack unselfish love and kindness? I have met many people with lots of spiritual / metaphysical knowledge who are still normal, selfish people. They may even be relatively kind and giving ordinarily, but unkind and selfish when kindness and giving requires any real self-sacrifice or gets in the way of what they want. On the other hand, I have met truly kind and giving people who are metaphysically ignorant. They might think karma is some kind of new car wax if it weren't explained to them. Yet they are kind and giving. And they may really understand and believe in what karma actually means. You reap what you sow. In a very real sense, even though they don't even know the word, they may really know much more than some new age jive talker and be of real higher consciousness than someone giving spiritual seminars. So, who is really of higher consciousness? Let's say your house gets destroyed by a tornado. Who would you like as a neighbor? Someone who helps you rebuild it, give you shelter or food, or someone who will patronizingly inform you that you attracted the misfortune to yourself, then drive off and leave you in the dust of their Mercedes as they rush off to attend another seminar on prosperity, which is likely to be nothing more than learning black magic visualization techniques disguised as a money-making program. Who's more spiritually involved here? True prosperity to someone who can take with you when you die, and it only comes when you give through unselfish love. Back to Raja's lecture, which was stabbing me in the heart of my ego. If a person has attained universal consciousness, they, by the very nature of that, cannot be simultaneously selfish. And if a person is still selfish, they cannot be one with universal spirit or have universal consciousness. Many people's spirituality excludes this simple fact, and many use sophisticated spiritual rationalizations to actually maintain their selfish separate self. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Raja, I said challengingly, rather than your own opinion, are there any actual specific teachings of Atlantean children of the Law of One that talk about this alleged great wall of self-trickery? Very many, young novice. They say that you must have an in the flesh teacher who is a clear mirror that will, number one, reflect your thoughts, feelings, and actions back to yourself accurately so you can see through self-delusion. And number two, be a mirror that shows you yourself, whether you want to see yourself or not, whether you look in it or not. In other words, one that makes you look at yourself even when you avoid seeing yourself by self-trickery. So you're talking about a magic mirror. Gosh, you don't want to get this, do you? Such a clean mirror is a true teacher. The teachings make it absolutely clear that they find that the final stage in a person's evolution back to oneness with the universal spirit is to find and use a true teacher to see themselves so they can really change. This is what a true teacher is here for. Such teachers are enlightened masters who have purged their own programming and selfishness and become clear mirrors. What is an unclear mirror? Nearly everyone else on earth, other than a true teacher, everyone you meet reflects you back to yourself and gives you a chance to see yourself. But the reflection comes back distorted by whatever problem the mirror has. In the case of human mirrors, the distortion will come from the person's own programming, beliefs, prejudice, and etc. All these things make for a warped mirror like those in a fun house and will reflect back a distorted view of yourself. Even someone you may respect and who you have received good spiritual or philosophical teachings from can only offer you very limited help in your spiritual journey if they are still unclear, distorted mirrors. If you don't want to delude yourself, deceive yourself, then you need an enlightened spiritual teacher. Otherwise, yourself will always figure out ways to ultimately avoid having your separate illusion exposed and dissipated. If growth is what you really want, there is nothing that compares to having a true teacher. No meditation, no methods, no exercise, no words, no ideas, no mediums, channels, no psychics will do by themselves. Again, the teachings of the Atlantean children are very strong on this point. You must, at some point, have a teacher if you are to proceed beyond a certain point on your path. The teachings do say there are very rare exceptions, but that there is less than a 1 in a billion chance to succeed otherwise, although that may change in the very near future as the coming changes present new opportunities and create forced internal spiritual changes for some. Maybe you'll be the first to really do it by yourself, young novice. Nope, no such luck. Learn instead of burn. Later, once I finally given up trying to avoid it, I found my true teacher, Zayn. We had such great conversations. One time, I had a wonderful talk with him about the various ways of learning, growing, and working towards enlightenment, which pertain to this chapter. Father, what is the best way to learn, and how can we know who to listen to and who not to listen to? It is said that a wise man listens and learns from the wise and the fool. We can and should learn from anyone and everyone, and from life itself. Everything attempts to teach us, and we can learn if we are open. Also, We can learn things from the school of hard knocks, life experience. Unfortunately, that is the way most people learn. And I only say unfortunately because it is the slowest and most painful way. We can learn more easily by osmosis, sort of absorbing by contact from the experience of others. In this way, we can benefit from the lessons already learned by others who either went through the school of hard knocks or learned from osmosis also. This is the easiest, fastest, and most wise way to learn. For instance, if we see someone get burned by putting their hand in a fire, we can also learn from that, rather than also putting our hand in the fire to learn that it burns. Or, in another kind of example, if we spend time around a great chef, we are likely to pick up on their knowledge and skills, as opposed to spending years experimenting with cooking ourselves, burning things, making terrible tasting foods, etc. The experiences of others can be ours if we are open to it, to learn by osmosis from the experience of an unselfishly loving, universally conscious, clear mirror is the absolute easiest and best way to learn and spiritually grow. The circle and the spiral. Reincarnation creates a situation in which people with karmatic ties keep coming back into each other's lives. For instance, your mother may have played many roles in various past lives. Your sister, friend, daughter, a romantic rival, wife, or lover. As was mentioned earlier in the book, initiates of the Atlantean children of the Law of One who have not ascended permanently left the physical bodies of the earth plane behind have reincarnated time and time again throughout the world. They keep coming back, picking up where they left off, continuing on to serve the light and the seekers of the light. Father, speaking of learning from the experience of others and of clear mirror teachers, I have heard it said that the Dalai Lama continues to reincarnate and as the same person in the same position. Is this true? Most assuredly, and not just the Dalai Lama. Other higher consciousness Buddhist teachers do this also. That is their way. What do you mean their way? Our tradition does something very similar, yet somewhat differently. When a teacher leaves this earth and chooses to reincarnate, the inner self and outside influences and circumstances compels him to become who he was in his past, i.e., to regain the same level of consciousness he previously had. That applies to any enlightened teacher of any path. In ours, the initiate who does this is inwardly compelled to find other initiates of the children again and return to a monastery for the period of reinitiation, relearning, re-enlightenment, and other initiates look for the reincarnated, pre-reinitiated adept who is to again become a true teacher of our order. Again, this is done in many traditions in various ways, like you found me, or vice versa, or both. Yes, but when do you start looking, and how long does it take to be reinitiated or become enlightened again? This generally occurs before age 21 and will occur whether the reincarnated true teacher is yet aware of who he is and was or not. Often, a true teacher will not be conscious of who they are when they are young and will only begin becoming conscious of their true self sometime between the age of 14 and 21. Nevertheless, their enlightenment will occur by 21. This is a universal law and applies to everyone. What about those who weren't enlightened or aren't one of the spiritual traditions who do this? Regardless of whether you are one of the children or not, or enlightened or not, whatever your consciousness, level of spiritual consciousness attained was when you died in your previous life, you attain that same level of consciousness again around age 21. This is unavoidable. And then what? From that point of regaining previous adult consciousness, one can make spiritual progress or regress. Editor's note: this means a person can achieve enlightenment at any age. Why do some enlightened teachers return and some don't? Because it's their choice. Some of the children continue to return to the earth plane to help others free themselves from the illusion of separateness. Others wish to join their like kind on the higher planes. Some grow very weary and finally wish to leave, like me. You're going to leave? Not yet. Relax. You will be a teacher off on your own before I go. And you won't come back? No. Will I ever see you again? See me with eyes? No. Once you finally move on from here, perhaps. Why only perhaps? Aren't we connected somehow? Most definitely. But if you stay a great deal longer, I will still be moving on with my own evolution in the order of things. If it is too long, we will not be next to each other in the chain. But we will always be one within the chain. What about me? You said I will be a true teacher. Yes. So I will be enlightened before I'm 21? Perhaps, thereabouts. Do you know if I will come back? No, that's for you to decide. That's your free will choice. You said earlier something about our traditions doing some things a bit differently than the Buddhist as far as teachers reincarnating. What's the difference about it? What you've described all sounds the same. Those of us who do this life after life take turns helping us find each other again before age 21. This is similar to what is done in Tibetan Buddhism by the Dalai Lama and other high consciousness lamas. However, the Tibetan Buddhists generally start younger because of their unique social structure. A group of Buddhist monks identifies the child who is the incarnation of the Dalai Lama or whomever they are looking for. Then, once they are positive they have the right being, the child enters a monastery to begin training to take his place in the order once again. Teachers of the children of the law of one, however, don't necessarily return to the same positions, same land, or even same race. They are all over the world, fitting into many places, many guises, and need various backgrounds for their chosen destiny. So, it's not so simple to get them back as children. You can imagine what would happen if some guy showed up at some modern Jewish couple's apartment in New York City and said they are there to take their baby to Tibet with them because they are so and so, the reincarnated old adept and true teacher. Yeah. How do you say 20 years to life in Tibet or Yiddish? You get the point. Nevertheless, we are looked after from on high and still physically located before age 21. So, we can begin the work that brings us back to full consciousness of oneness by the time we reach 21. It was different in the old days and more like it is for the Tibetans, but even modern times are beginning to change things for them, and they will find their teachers being born in other lands and may eventually be faced with similar issues as ours. But don't forget, there are many with high consciousness who are of our order or our path who may not have achieved final initiation yet. Thus, they may still come into your life or vice versa, even though it is not by the time they are 21. Remember, they are still at some stage of development, some stage of initiation towards the final one. That's why there are 22 cards in the deck depicting the stages of initiation, and there will be 22 chapters in the book you will write. Even the one who is at stage 1, the Fool. It's just as important a soul as any. And the Fool is both the beginning and ending. To be enlightened also means to be a fool for God. I will remember, Father. In my case, I was found or did the finding through that weird TV broadcast. As you are probably aware of by this time, Zayn became my personal teacher. It was he I saw on TV. Once I got to know him well, I asked him more about the broadcast. Father, do you know how I got here? I saw you on TV, on a TV station that couldn't exist, on a TV band that isn't and wasn't even ever used. But I know I didn't imagine it. You didn't imagine it, Peniel. It was a broadcast that was just for you. You are the only one who saw it, the only one that came, the only one it was for. How did it happen, though? Magic? In a way, many things, including science magic, were involved. There were friends of ours in the area at the time who had friends involved with a more open-minded Christian church there. Our friends were wise in the ways of modern technology. They made a broadcast of a recording made of me here. It was illegal there to make the broadcast they did, but they believed nothing would become of it because it was going to be so short. Nonetheless, they had a backup. They said because it was from the basement of their church, they were protected by their laws. They were guided as to the timing and all other factors so that I would be seen by you and find you, and you will find me, even though I was thousands of miles away at the time. Who I am, who am I, and who are you? that this would be so extreme. You are very special, Peniel. You have no idea how special, because you think you are so special? Huh? I later discovered we are all special. We just need to transcend our selfish, separate self, take our place in the chain of the one, and become a vehicle for a servant of the universal spirit. He went on to tell me more of how teachers of the children found each other, especially ones with special links to each other. As Zayn spoke of how he and I had helped each other, taught each other, and worked together, past life memories flooded back to me like I was in a movie, but they were in fragments, like the movie had been edited by a chimp. He also told me of some of my ties and times with the Grandmaster. Zayn and I had particularly strong karmic ties and were sometimes like two sides of a coin. We each had different qualities that ordinarily would make for unlikely friends, but actually complemented our abilities to help others when we worked together. In many ways, we were like night and day, very different personalities, talents, and skills. Yet, there were also many similar talents, skills, loves, and qualities. Most importantly, we were on the same team. We had always fought in our own ways for the light, justice, truth, and freedom. We had a deep respect and appreciation for each other that few could ever understand. It was as it always was through so many lifetimes. He seemed to admire me like a good son, brother, best friend, and father, and I him. But it wasn't always so. When I first arrived at the monastery and set eyes on him, he terrified me. I avoided him like the plague. I was still under the strong influence of my selfish, separate self. But we'll cover all that in a bit. First, let's finish the subject at hand. Ancient teachers of the children of the law of one finding each other before age 21. Throughout the ages, it was the same situation over and over again. I, as a teacher, would be found by a young man who may have been my teacher before, and vice versa. And didn't matter which was which or who was who. We were all part of the one, going through revolving doors. Sometimes we would even be members of the same biological family, but usually not. And it mattered not. So it was that I, through this process, my destiny, my spiritual pursuits and training ultimately returned again to universal consciousness at age 21. Myself, what I had previously thought was me as a child, sort of died at age 21 and subsequently was reborn as a servant of the one universal spirit, the universal will. Along with the death of my illusion of separateness, my beliefs, intellectual processes, and programming were all transformed at the same time. Essentially, my separate self, the independent thing I had given life to, which maintained my separateness from the universe, died. It ceased to exist as a separate self, but only for a moment. It was like a metamorphosis, like a caterpillar seeming to die to become a butterfly. My old separate self was only like a bubble of illusions that surrounded me and kept my consciousness separate from the universe and my true self locked inside me. Once that bubble burst, my real self, the inner self, being part of the universal one, was all that was left of me then, and so freed, I could again see the world anew through eyes that see beyond this world, and to again play my part as one of the instruments in the grand orchestra of the one. Editor's note. Again, a person can achieve enlightenment at any age. The oneness of all inner selves. The inner self in everyone is part of the same part of the one. When I first heard Zayn speaking on that mysterious TV broadcast, it was really his inner self who was speaking to my inner self. It was the voice of the universal spirit calling out to and speaking to another part of itself. That's why it rang. It rang my inner bell of truth. That's how I could feel and know it was true. But I was ready, no, desperate to hear. As my inner self, speaks to you now, I speak to you as your own inner self. Thus you can feel the truth I speak to you, as if you already know it. The closer you are to your own inner self, the more strongly you will feel this. Those of you who are distant may not feel this, and those who have blocked your inner self, you will find these words disturbing. The extent of the disturbance will depend on how intensely you are blocked. Okay, that's the we're going to stop there, and when we pick up again, we'll start at Finding My True Teacher on page 191. Such fascinating readings of The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by Jon Peniel. Yes, we are heading down that road of enlightenment. Please take the time to subscribe if you have not, and please take the time to push that like button if you have not. And to those that have already done all the following, thank you. I appreciate it. So until we come together again, have the most benevolent day.